I've always had a soft spot for the Persona series. Maybe it's because I'm such a big fan of the mainline Shin Megami Tensei series, or maybe because I simply think it's a downright good franchise to sink my time into. But whether I'm spreading rumors around Sumaru City, or hanging out with my friends in Inaba, I've always enjoyed the Persona games. No, they're not perfect. I'd even say that nearly every game in the franchise so far has had one or more flaws that cripple said game from being as good as it could have been, and the most recent entry is no different. Persona 5, the game that's hyped us up since 2013, which happened to be around the same time I got invested in the Mega 10 series right after finishing Shin Megami Tensei 4. I like listening to the Persona 3 and 4 soundtracks, and I was curious when they announced Persona 5 for the first time. However, I wasn't too privy on how the recent Persona games had played, but surely enough, by 2016, when the official release date was shown in Japan and America, I had nearly played every game in the franchise, minus the Persona 4 spin-offs, because those are kind of fucking trash. Needless to say, I fell into the hype, and I was genuinely excited to see what Atlus was brewing for this new release. Surely enough, when 2017 rolled around the corner, the game got delayed again. But April 4th, I got my hands on what I expected to be one of the greatest games I've ever played, and to a lot of people, it really is one of the greatest games they've ever played. And seeing how Persona 5 is clearly becoming the most popular game in both the SMT and Persona franchise, I think it's a better time than ever to showcase where Persona 5 falls short, and what left this game feeling incredibly off for me. Now, I know how strong the Persona fanbase is, and I know how much people love a lot of the things that I may claim to dislike about the games, so I just want to say a few things before I begin. I love Persona 5. Persona 5 is an A+ game. The game is fun to play and easily accessible to new players trying out the series, and I think that overall, as an RPG, the game is of the highest quality we've seen from Atlus, and I'm more than happy to see them succeed, and I hope to see good things from them in the future, SMT and Persona together. This is how I see the shortcomings of Persona 5 as an individual who was a former anime fan. I can't really stand this shit anymore, so a lot of the points I will make may be something you 100% enjoyed. Every opinion is just that, an opinion of what works and what doesn't in the game, and I hope that you can respect my view, and in response, I'll respect yours. But without further delay, it's fucking terrible. Let's start the game and see what Persona 5 has to offer. The first thing I want to go over are the things that I feel overall don't work with the game, before I go into specifics as to avoid as many spoilers as possible off the bat. But in the case where spoilers will be discussed, there will be a warning with the timestamp that you can skip to. Spoilers to me, specifically, are the twists of the game, and everything near the end of the game, i.e. the final few dungeons, character reveals, hidden bosses, and the final boss. Events like new party members joining are not considered spoilers aside from Crow, but I'll talk about that later. Anyways, I wanted to get over this point first because it's the smallest and most harmless quandary I have with this game. I love all the tracks Shoji Meguro made for this game, and I'm super stoked that he got into a different element from what he's been used to for years now. No matter what Mega 10 game he composed, no matter what style each game took, overall Meguro composed similar music. Like honestly, play me the Fog from Persona 4 or the final decisive battle from Raito 2, and I honestly couldn't tell you the difference. The new style, however, is all over the place. There's some jazz, rock, some cinematic shit, and I'm sure there's like techno somewhere. But even then, considering how much I like the soundtrack, I cannot for the life of me stand the normal battle theme, Last Surprise. As a song, I think it's great. I think it fits well with the theme, and the new vocalist Lynn does a great job, speaking English. But in game, I can't bear it at all. I can't for the life of me stand the track. The reason for that is that I found the game rather easy, and I found myself overleveled with almost no effort at all. But since I was so strong, the entire time, battles would end very quickly, and all I would hear is the intro segment. I wouldn't ever get into the first verse, so every fucking 30 seconds, it would be severely annoying. Aside from that, I found that only a few select songs are played throughout the game prominently, and I mean, the soundtrack has over 100 tracks of genuine passion and effort from Shoji Meguro. spanning over almost 3 hours. But how many songs do you actually hear throughout the game? Honestly, take a shot every time you hear tension, desire, suspicion, break it down, or restlessness. You will actually die. This is something that was a problem in Persona 4 and 3 as well, but I feel as if it's more prominent in Persona 5, mainly because the game has such a fucking amazing soundtrack. I just wish I could hear it and not the same 5 songs every 5 seconds. And now we're actually getting into the real meat of the video. I want to start by saying that these characters initially are better than any character in Persona 1, 3, and 4. They almost rival the likes of Persona 2 in the way they interact with each other and the pure chemistry all these characters have. But the issue lies in the fact that every character in Persona 5 ends up being a typical one-note anime stereotype character, with a few exceptions. Morgana is essentially your voice throughout the game, which works well to make the game seem less like a visual novel, with the text being replaced with dialogue for Morgana. But if I'm being honest, it gets annoying hearing the same voice lines every day, especially during exams.
Ooh, we can do this!
But as a character, I really don't know what to think about him. It feels like they put him in solely to be the mascot character, and his relevance to the plot feels out of the blue. Maybe I missed a couple things, but it just felt off to me. Plus, that segment in the middle of the game where he runs away because Ryuji bullies him was unnecessary and felt like really forced conflict to push the plot in a certain direction. An is the pretty girl who eats a lot of food and is the generic big boob anime girl. She really loves her friend Shiho. And aside from her generic fish out of water type story, I felt zero attachment to her. Yusuke started off really good, but just ended up being a dumbass who likes art. He also becomes poor because Persona writers are so incompetent when writing characters that they made a literal embodiment of the starving artist cliche. Mikoto is the typical forced romance option that the game really wants you to like or date. She's the Yukari or the Rise of Persona 5, essentially. She's fucking boring and randomly becomes the brains of the Phantom Thieves when Morgana did a good enough job himself. She really loves her sister, and that's all her character is, in the main story, at least. And man, poor little Haru, she just feels underdeveloped simply because of how late she's added into the game. Her character is completely pushed to the side because during the plot, major shit starts going down immediately after her addition. She feels like a one-note character, and her confidant really doesn't do much to help with that. And honestly, if she was more developed, her confidant would have been perfectly fine. It's an addition to the character that I honestly would be intrigued in if we had character to build upon. And it's lacking, and that's what I don't like about Haru. Ryuji is really the only Phantom Thief that I like, mainly because his character stays the same throughout the game. Most of the other Phantom Thieves become one-note or just drop whatever resemblance of character they had going for them, but Ryuji really stuck out to me as a consistent all-star. But that's due to the fact that he's the generic, loyal, hot-headed best friend type character. But at the very least, he stayed the same throughout the game, unlike the other party members who ended up molding into their inevitable cliché anime tropes. My only gripe is that the writing made him to be the butt of every joke in the game, which became severely annoying after a certain time. Especially since he's a character who has his own clear-cut flaws that aren't just because of other people, the same way Mikoto is tied to her sister, or that Futaba is scared of people. Also, I just realized that I forgot to add Futaba into the script, so I'm just gonna go over her now. Fuck Futaba. Ryuji is just a character with good intentions that makes quick, rash decisions.
You bastard! The hell did you do to that girl?
What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb with me!
Nothing about him shows that he's just a fucking idiot aside from his academics, which is completely not a part of his character. So now you might be wondering,
Wow, this guy really must hate all the characters in the game. He barely likes the Phantom Thieves. I wonder why he's such a little fucking bitch.
I just want to say that social links are something that I've always had a problem with. But I felt like Persona 5 had this issue in full force. Social links are not, and should never, be a replacement for actual character development. Social links work best as an extension of a character that we've already been presented. as a certain way to get to know them more as people rather than party members. It gives each character, and even the world around them, life that we don't see in many JRPGs. The issue here is that we don't get enough time to develop said characters, so the social links in Persona 5 feel incredibly shallow. Even in games like Persona 3, we had story events that changed our group of characters and the way they interact with each other and the relationships between them. And even in Persona 4, you had scenes of the mystery gang just hanging out as friends, but by the same token, they took some time to discuss their mystery and trying to put the pieces together. Social links were just a chance to get more insight on a character that you found interesting, and maybe have a chance at dating your super cool, not cardboard anime waifu. The issue is that most social links revolve around someone's past or really something you have no real input on, and you just end up listening to someone's problems and awkwardly flirting with them when you get the chance. And to its credit, Persona 5 fixes that to some degree, but to compromise, there's absolutely zero character development throughout the game. The group is almost always together, and as such, nothing really happens besides just talking. And a lot of Persona 5's plot revolves around the Phantom Thieves and the drama/fame surrounding them. That leaves a lot of the character development being left to the side because there's simply not enough time in the game to do so. When you spend so much time developing the Phantom Thieves as a whole, as in the ideology and actions of the group, there needs to be something to develop each individual unit of the group, and I'm sure that's what the intention of Confidants were. But what kind of game design is that? And even then, outside of the main group, there are multiple other people you can form a bond with, so unless you're following some kind of guide, it's almost impossible to experience everything and every character the game has to offer. And if you try to balance without said guide, a lot of characters just end up feeling underdeveloped and shallow. And adding more fuel to the fire is the fact that most of these confidants are almost always the same for every non-Phantom Thief. You meet the person, you have some initial connection with the person, the shitty adult comes in and causes conflict, then the person hides their past from Joker, the conflict gets a little worse, then the person opens up to Joker, Joker fights the shitty adults in Mementos, and then the person miraculously finds out the Joker is a Phantom Thief and they never speak about it ever again, and then you max out their confidant and you never speak to them ever again. It just felt very cookie cutter in its execution, but there were some ones that really stood out to me, like, I really liked Yoshida's because it didn't focus all of its time on his past, and we could see him actively move on and improve from what he used to be. We didn't have to waste any of our time trying to pry his no-good Tora past out of him. I liked Ryuji's as well because it had little to do with his past and more about atoning for what he did. Everything we needed to know to progress as confidant was told in Kamoshida's palace, and it was really nice watching him grow up into the character that we know now in the game. Yusuke's as well because it finishes his arc, which is something that none of the other characters get to do. He finally finds his freedom from adults and it feels really nice watching him grow up in a sense. But aside from those and a few others, nothing really stood out to me, and this is possibly some of the worst ways to lazily develop a character that I've seen in a long time, and if you're going to that level of laziness, you could at least make it good. While I personally didn't date on in my playthrough, my good friend Johnny Awesome did in his Let's Play of Persona 5, and even then, Odd would make jabs at Joker, Ryuji, and Morgana for never being able to get girls. There's a scene on the beach I'm thinking about in specific. But anyways, the game practically ignores the fact that in said playthrough, Joker is dating on and just continues as if the relationship doesn't exist. I feel like it's the laziest form of writing when you can't even find a way to properly incorporate something so integral like confidants and relationships into the script and maybe change one or two few lines of text. Would it be tedious? Yes. Would it add polish to the game and avoid confusing and nonsensical dialogue presented in said game? Yes. Am I nitpicking over something very minute because I'm a faggot who played too much SMT4 and Nocturne and got spoiled by the attention to detail? Yeah, kind of. Overall, this is a smaller offense. I felt like the game set up its villains properly with Kamoshida. He was an utter scumbag, a piece of shit who you hated from day one. You could clearly see the impact he had on people's lives and the kind of power he had over students and how that was reflected in the way he treated them. It even got to the point where nobody could say anything about the abuse, and a girl even tried to kill herself. That's a villain. That is a real-ass villain. That is the type of fuckery that makes you want to jump right into a palace and kick the crap out of that palace ruler. Mainly because things like sexual assault, physical abuse, and fear-mongering in a school environment is something that would hit home for some people. Now, it's not something that happens to an everyday person like you or me, but it does happen in the real world, and it's even worse in places like Japan, where grades, status, and adhering to adults is what's important and almost forced onto teenagers in Japan. It's a perfect example of an opening villain done right, and it perfectly encapsulates the themes of corrupt adults better than any other villain in the game did, which is great. But also really bad if you consider the fact that he's the first boss in a 90+ hour game. But everything after that really never had the same treatment or the same impact in general. Madarame had some of it, but most of it was spent in the dungeon right before his boss fight. Kaneshiro is just a gang boss with some dirt on your group. Futaba's shadow was interesting to say the least, but was just a mess in its execution, and I really didn't understand how most of it worked. But I really guess that's more my fault and not the game's. And Okumura's just kind of fell flat to the point where they pounded in the whole, oh well, this guy really doesn't care about his workers, to the point where it just got obnoxious to hear, and especially since that's all he did wrong. It's not like we need to hear how bad he is 24/7 when that's all he does. And honestly, there's a real lack of connection between the later villains in the game. Everything that made Kamoshida a great villain is dropped in favor of making something a little more dramatic. Not a lot of people can relate to the issues presented in the bosses preceding Kamoshida. You'll rarely meet someone who has a surrogate father / caretaker who murdered their mother and stole art from small little children. You won't find a high schooler who's been kidnapped, drugged, and blackmailed by a mob boss for money, and you most certainly wouldn't have met someone whose father tries to sell them off to a rich adult for the sake of his fucking burger company. In making these villains so outlandish and unrelatable, you lose that initial connection that people could have felt with Kamoshida. There's no real sense of drive outside of the game telling you that, this guy is bad, stop him from being bad, and you going, oh, okay. And when that happens, especially when you had an amazing opening villain, the later bosses feel more like the typical anime villain of the week type flavor. And that's a flavor that gets bland really quickly. But, all that aside, I really don't think that the palace rulers are the biggest offense in the game. The real meat of the section comes in the form of Goro Akechi is probably one of the messiest, poorly written, and outright bad things about Persona 5. It's what personally made me dislike the middle chunk of the game, as well as made me really question the praise the game receives, especially through its writing and characters. Goro Akechi and the main character are supposed to reflect the story of Arsène Lupin and Sherlock Holmes. But honestly, it's such a loose tie and such a flimsily woven relationship. It reminds me more of Death Note, a really fucking boring anime that I watched when I was 12, which is never a good thing to be reminded of when playing a game praised for its clever plot and well-developed characters. Akechi's character arc is such a roller coaster, and most of it really doesn't fit the character, or at the very least the way the game sets him up to be. It felt like they really rushed him and just tossed in a sad backstory to justify him being evil in the end. But even then, that doesn't really explain or justify his psychosis, or even explain why he would try so hard to kill the Phantom Thieves. We knew he was going to be the traitor from the very moment we met him. His confidant progressed with the story, which was a dead giveaway, and even then, it only progressed over the most menial shit. Like, this nigga would walk up to you, say some random shit with little to no response from you, and then bam, you just magically rank up? The only characters in the game to have a similar confidant progression were both Sai Nijima, whose confidant was only established after Joker's arrest, and Morgana, who could have only been heard by those who have been in the metaverse. So there is no other person who could have been the traitor. It was so painfully obvious, it was only a matter of time. and considering it was supposed to be the biggest twist of the game, it totally fell flat and had zero impact on me as a player. Akechi's whole dilemma was that he yearned for fame to make up for his shitty childhood, and he thinks that Joker and the group are the reason his time as the detective prince was overshadowed. Wouldn't it be a better way to end his arc if he had just fought the Phantom Thieves or even Joker one-on-one and realized that he can't beat them? Just like he couldn't outshine the Phantom Thieves' popularity. He couldn't beat them in any field. He couldn't outsmart them, he couldn't kill Joker, he couldn't corner them, and he definitely couldn't defeat them in a fight. Instead of having him die, just have him realize that he can't bring the spotlight off the Phantom Thieves, thus making him realize that he lost his way, and without people he can turn to, he's no different from someone like Shido, a selfish person who's only out for their own personal gain.
Wow, okay. Honestly, I can't say much about the pacing of the game because I've never played it, but that seemed a little bit rushed and out of nowhere, to be honest, from the little bit that I've seen of it so far. That, I was not expecting that. And then they just go along with it, I guess? I don't know. I just feel like it's not really justified. Their reasoning for it is really kind of out of nowhere. It's the whole, oh, well, friendship and everything is going to be okay because we believe in you. And, you know, I don't know much about the Persona games, but I feel like they should be above that, I guess, in terms of writing and script and characters. That just... like, I'm gonna fucking kill you! Oh man, it's okay, dude. We love you. Come on, let's be friends. It just didn't feel like it fit. It just was really, really rushed. Like, out of everything that I've seen, it's just boom. Like, there it is.
But even then, Akechi's breakdown made no sense to me, and it felt like a really bad rehash of Adachi's reveal from the previous game, Persona 4 Golden. It's nice that Akechi finally got some shred of character, but this was definitely not the way to do it. Like, am I just not seeing what people like about him? Am I just getting too cynical for this shit? I was talking with some of my friends who really like anime, and they described the relationship between Akechi and Joker as Fujo bait. For those of you who don't know, Fujoshi is essentially where writers try really hard to make two seemingly straight characters gay, thus provoking the consumer to start making gay ships and gay porn of the two characters without outright saying it. It's seen in more forms of media and games that aren't even Persona. You see it in Overwatch, Fire Emblem, Sonic the Hedgehog, fucking... I don't know, fucking Minecraft. But honestly, what I'm getting at here is that I feel like the character of Goro Akechi and the relationship he had with Joker seems completely inflated, and I feel like Goro himself is an overrated character in the highest degree. Even at the end of his character arc, when he sacrifices his life to save the group, how am I supposed to feel? Bad? Like, literally 5 minutes ago, this nigga tried to kill me and said he only wanted us dead. And he said he doesn't care about friendship or comrades, and may I add, this kid sold you out to the cops and attempted to murder you. How am I supposed to suddenly fall back and feel sorry for him when he's been a piece of shit throughout the entire game? I personally feel that Goro Akechi, in his development, his confidant, his relevance to the plot, and his arc as a villain, only further exacerbates the problems I've talked about before. He is the negative in this game, and I have no idea why people hype him up the way they do. People who only add fuel to the fire and request that more fan-servicey relationships are to be in Persona games are the problem. Because then, writers will prioritize fan service over making something with an identity, which is the same fate that befell franchises like Final Fantasy and even Fire Emblem. Persona was and always will be a series that thrives on its characters and its themes and its plot and its relationships. So by satiating the needs of a vocal majority of fans who requested more dumbed-down themes and character arcs, the series is only going to become less and less of what it once was, and it's only going to become increasingly more vapid as time goes on. Like, I swear I love this game, I really do. I enjoyed every single second of it, almost. But looking back after the fact, after spending a good 90+ hours, I just can't hold it to the same regard as fellow fans and most critics have. Maybe I'm just over-exaggerating a little bit, but I'm honestly not the only person who's had grievances about the game and its writing either. So in preparation for this video, I went to Reddit, bear with me here, to see what r/Megaten thought were the shortcomings of Persona 5. And aside from the expected whining from petulant man-children because I dared to try and fault a perfect game like Persona 5 from a critical standpoint, I actually got some rather insightful points that I myself didn't even think of. Now, if you could care less about what people have to say about the game, then you can skip to this timestamp here. If not, enjoy the music and see what the community has to say about Persona 5. So what can we gather from this video? Persona 5 was a pure passion project, and a last-ditch attempt at making Persona a household name, and it definitely worked. People were crazy hyped for this game, and it only built up as the years went by, and the hype train stayed chugging up until and even after April 4th. Even today, people are still hyped for Persona 5, but take away the hype and what's really left to see? A solid 8 out of 10 JRPG with some inherent flaws and nothing special outside of the series it's under? I feel like we shouldn't give the shortcomings of a certain game a pass just because it's the same formula that's been working since 2006. The same way I wouldn't expect people to kiss the ground games like SMT4 or Apocalypse walk upon just because they liked Nocturne back in 2003. I wholeheartedly believe that for a game developer to improve, or even for a fan base to improve, we need to point out the fact that no matter the hype, or how nice the music is, or how cute the 2D anime girls are, games will always have something to improve upon, and to applaud, and to even ask for more mediocrity is a one-way ticket to making a series as lifeless and vapid as the series they're competing against. I believe Persona 5 is a well-crafted and amazing game, but to overlook its flaws helps nobody. This isn't to say that I'm above the fan base and that I'm the end-all be-all of deciding whether or not a game is good or bad, but to try to make the normal consumer, or maybe even a diehard Persona fan, realize that maybe what we got isn't as good as the reviews say. Still good in its own right, but not the 10 out of 10s or 9.5 out of 10s we were promised. But if you're still deciding on whether or not you should purchase Persona 5, go for it. Even with its flaws, it's still a game that's worth your time if you enjoy this kind of content. If not only for the fact that you're helping Alice produce more high-quality content like this. Persona 5 is a must-have on the PS4 or PS3 and will definitely be a game that will take your heart. Hey everybody, thank you so much for sticking with me till the end of the video, but before I sign off, I'd like to thank a couple people. I'd like to thank Johnny Awesome for once again letting me use his footage for this video. I couldn't have done it without you, bro. I'd also like to thank Yo-Yo3639 for helping me edit this gigantic piece of shit script into a smaller, condensed, and cohesive one. I appreciate the help more than you could imagine. I'd also like to thank, most importantly, a fan and a buddy of mine, Little Man, for helping me with the ropes of Sony Vegas. Without him, this video would be a lot worse in the quality department. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and take it easy.